would say 100 years ago, these are almost all pure ape. They really were subhuman. They were ape-like. It changed a little bit into the 1970s to give them a little more human traits, but pretty much no real human stuff. They really didn't have burial practices, didn't care for others, pretty much couldn't hold a tool in their hand, pretty much couldn't make a tool. And so as you look at evolution, you see them with a very strong goal to produce a subhuman. How to be primitive, how to be stupid, something halfway between a common ancestor and us. And so that was the goal of evolution, to produce this subhuman. Dr. Jack Quazzo, who went to the museums, he was incredibly qualified. He had unbelievable access. He took incredible photos and x-rays, and he did some amazing research, and he was absolutely dedicated to discovering the truth. What he found was the museums were full of deliberate deceptions. We're going to lay those out for you. Now, how many skeletons are we talking about? Basic Neanderthal book would say, you know, there's 500, even more. Are there really hundreds? Well, when you look at In Search of Neanderthals by Dr. Stringer, he says about a dozen tolerably complete examples of skulls and limb bones. In reality, in a dig, you take out 20-some pieces of bone, some teeth thrown in there. That would be 20-some Neanderthals. But complete examples of skulls and limb bones, about a dozen tolerably complete examples. So let's dig into the deliberate deceptions. We're going to focus on what I would call the pre-Neanderthal deceptions to start with. I'd like to start with somebody who's called Homo heidelbergensis. In the Smithsonian Project, used to be called Rhodesian man, used to be called Broken Hill man, all the same guy. And if you look at the context of where the skull was found, most textbooks would say that he was found 60 feet down in a mine, the depth indicating great antiquity. I thought 60 feet down in the mine, there's never skulls found in situations or a context like that. And so I began to do a little research, and what I discovered was the real context of the find. I got the Illustrated London News from November 19th, 1921, and indeed it was not found 60 feet down in a mine. It was in an area owned by a mine, but they were basically excavating a road to lead to the mine, and they cut through a cave, now called the famous Bone Cave. In that Illustrated London News, they actually showed the exact spot where the skull was found. And they admitted that a human femur was found, a modern human femur was found with the skull, a modern shin bone was found with the skull, 2 modern pelvises were found with the skull, and modern animal bones. The Rhodesian man that I was educated in stood very, very tall because that skull was married to modern human limb bones. But from an evolutionary point of view, you can't have those straight, tall individuals, and so they got rid of Rhodesian man altogether. As you examine the teeth, everybody admits the teeth were from a fully modern type. Now, what do you mean, a fully modern type set of teeth? Yes, they had loads and loads of cavities. And the one thing you do discover as you dig into these skulls is they don't have cavities. And so this cavity thing is a kind of a farming thing. The ones that were buried that we would consider to be old, they didn't have cavities. To make matters worse, it was discovered that he had a modern bullet hole through the skull. It's easy to see. It's round like a bullet hole should be. It's easy to see in Dr. Quazzo's x-ray of that skull. And Dr. Quazzo took a camera, a small camera, put it inside the skull, and took a picture of the bullet hole, and it exhibited what we would call a correct blast pattern, where the bullet blasted into the skull. Now remember, this picture is from inside the skull. Where the bullet blasted into this skull, it kind of, on the inside, left kind of a bevel where the material blasted out. This is a correct blast pattern for a bullet. It enters the outside of the skull and blows out a bevel into the skull itself. When you look at the path of the bullet, it's extremely easy to see if you put a small metal rod through it, and then you look at the exit hole, which is the wound from inside the skull blasting out. When you look closely at the exit hole, you see a absolute perfect, correct blast pattern in the exit wound. The bullet, probably from a Mauser rifle, and that rifle was used for the last 100 years as a big game rifle in Africa where the skull was found. So museums are presented with this issue. Why is there a bullet hole in a skull that you say is a transitional form when it's got a modern day bullet in the skull? Their answers are a little perplexing. Well, you know, the entry wound was from a disease, and the disease kind of ate through the skull, but it's a perfect entry wound. The exit wound, well, that's from a tumor where the tumor pushed it out. You mean it made a perfect entry wound and a perfect exit wound? No, that clearly is a bullet hole going through the skull. The alien people, they say, well, it definitely has a bullet hole through the skull. It must have been an alien that shot him in the head 150,000 years ago. An alien that shot him in the head. Don't they use lasers? This guy had to be shot while he was alive, because if they just took the skull out, put it on a rock and shot at it, the skull would shatter. He was shot while he was alive. The replicas, unfortunately, have been filled in. Some of the holes have kind of been squared off so that they wouldn't look like a bullet hole. Dr. Quazzo also took an X-ray of that Broken Hill skull, and what it revealed was pretty amazing because it had extremely extensive sinus formation within inside of it. Whoa, this is from a disease called the acromegaly disease. It's a growth hormone disease, probably a tumor on the pituitary gland, and it would produce a large brow. Probably the best known one with acromegaly disease, although there's many, many people with acromegaly disease, is Andre the Giant. And you could see that extreme sinus formation as you look at his skull. You could see the large brow that it kind of forced out of his skull. And so if you took the Broken Hill Man, looked at the sinus formation, compared it to the acromegaly disease, also in an X-ray, you would see that it matches perfectly. If you took Broken Hill Man and compared it with La Chapelle, kind of the type skull for the adult Neanderthals, you would see that it didn't match at all. So indeed, Broken Hill Man has acromegaly disease. Dr. Quazzo wrote 14 more reasons why it was diseased in his research notes in his book, but the Broken Hill skull cries out disease. Heidelbergensis, Broken Hill Man, and the Smithsonian Project is not from 60 feet down in a mine. It is from a cave filled with modern bones, modern human bones, many of them, modern animal bones, and there's really no extinct creatures in there whatsoever. The teeth have modern cavities. There's a modern bullet hole in the head. The X-rays showed that it has a growth hormone disease. This skull is from a modern man with a disease. He was shot in the head, and Heidelbergensis is clearly a deliberate deception.